In this short demo, we'll be looking at setting up BizTools Analytics for QuickBooks. During the demo, we'll process a QuickBooks sample company data file live and show you the end results at the end of the presentation. So the steps we'll be going through will be to use BizTools Professional Analytics to set up a company file from scratch. We'll go through the steps of mapping accounts, configure a few settings, and then process that data and have a look at the results. So firstly, we'll start with opening the BizTools application, and we'll just let that open up and move it over here. It's a four-step process. The first step in this case has already been done. It's completed during the installation process. So to add a new company data file in, we just need to go through set up companies, mapping accounts, and then refresh. And just to give you an idea of where we're currently at, we've got one company, Harry's Custom Landscaping, already set up. And within a company group, we've got two additional companies, Larry's and Rockcastle. So what we're going to do now is add a fourth one in, and we'll do that from beginning to end. There are a couple of global system settings that you can set, but generally for most people, most of the time, the defaults work perfectly. So you can change the tolerance settings to adjust the traffic light indicators for key financial ratios, and you can also set a default for the type of QuickBooks budget type that you might want to work with. Just to point out, you don't need to have budgets working or set up in QuickBooks, but you can select either budget by account and class or simply budget by account. And you can also do that at the company level, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. So reflecting on what we saw in the portal just a moment ago, we can see here that we've got these three companies in, Larry's Landscaping, Rockcastle Construction, and Harry's Custom Landscaping. The first two are also part of a consolidated group called Acme Group. And we can see here that for Harry's Custom Landscaping, it's been set up to use the budget type of account and class in QuickBooks. So we'll cancel that and we'll add a new company in. So the process is really about granting permission for a third-party application, in this case BizTools, to access the data within the QuickBooks company data file. So what we need to do is to open up QuickBooks just in the normal way, and we'll select a sample company data file, Barry's Botanical Services. You can see here it's a relatively small file, around about 24 megabyte. So we'll open that up. And I'll just drag the login screens into view so that you can see the whole process. We'll log into that. And because this is based on a sample company data file, we'll get this little pop-up as well. We'll take note that the current year to date is the 15th of December 2017. And we'll just click OK to that, and the file will open up in the normal way. So QuickBooks is open. It's opened the company data file, so we've met the criteria we need over here. We can tick yes and click OK. And then we'll step through the Intuit QuickBooks application certificate process, which allows us to get access to the data we need for analytics. So we'll say yes, we want to log in and access the data even if QuickBooks is not running, and we'll confirm that we're granting access to BizTools. And we're also going to select a QuickBooks admin user as the login to use so that we can access all the data we need for the financial and sales analytics. And then we'll click continue and just confirm that. And you can see on the right-hand side, BizTools has made a connection to the company data file, and it's also at this stage read the chart of accounts. So at this point, we can close QuickBooks. and go to the next step in the process, which is mapping accounts. Just before that, we'll just have a quick look to see we've now got Barry's Botanical Services added in, and because of the global default, it will work with the budget type of account and class in this particular case. Okay, so we'll now edit the mappings for this company data file, and we'll briefly talk about mapping and what the purpose is. We'll just make sure that we've got the right company selected, so Barry's Botanical Services. So account mapping is about giving BizTools a little bit more information about certain accounts. Most of the account mapping is automatic, but we do need to provide a little bit more information so that we can work with any QuickBooks chart of accounts and map those to our common high-level taxonomy for the balance sheet and the income statement. And the purpose of that is threefold. Firstly, it lets us work with any chart of accounts in any data file in QuickBooks, regardless of how you've got that set up. It also lets us do all of the calculations for over 25 financial ratios or KPIs. And it also facilitates consolidation of multiple company data files into a consolidated group. So most accounts within your chart of accounts will be automatically mapped based on their account type in QuickBooks. But for some, we need to provide a little bit more information for these categories or account codes, if you like, of amortization, depreciation, interest expense, etc. So that's the process of mapping accounts, and we'll go through that fairly quickly now. So we're just going to select one or more accounts that relate to or should be included in the bucket or the category of amortization expense, and then go to the next category. It's a very simple process. There's logic built in to prevent you from double mapping accounts or making mistakes. You'll notice, although we've read the entire chart of accounts, when we're looking to assign accounts or map them to an expense category, for example, depreciation, we only show you in the list a subset of the chart of accounts. So, for example, expense or other expense accounts. Okay, moving along. Income tax is the annual corporate tax that you may pay or not pay in some cases. And what we're going to do is use the account code column to just sort those accounts. And this is a navigational aid. We don't use account codes for any logic. You can see there are some accounts without account codes as well. And we're just going to pick up the state corporate tax category as well. And then we'll go back, sort by accounts, and proceed through the mapping process. And we'll select the intangible assets, the goodwill, and the accumulated amortization. In this example, we won't select security deposits. We'll use that for another category a little bit later on. Interest expense is a good example of the mapping process. So what we want to do is to grab any expense or other expense account that is of the nature or belongs to the category of interest expense. So we'll scroll down the list. In most cases, you can find them quite easily alphabetically, and we'll select those three. Being familiar with this sample data file, I'll click on the account code column header and also select a sub-account here, 7010, which is finance charges. That's really going to be included in the interest expense category. So one of the things mapping will do is, from a structural point of view, from a taxonomy point of view, it will move generic expense accounts, the ones that you've selected, out of SG&A and put them into a particular category for interest expense. And moving along, similarly, we'll assign the inventory asset account to the inventory category. Now, you may not have inventory, and that's fine. There'd be nothing to do there. Or you may have more than one inventory account. You may have an inventory work in progress or finished goods, in which case you'd select all of those accounts. Open equity balance. This is to make sure that the balance sheet balances. It's generally zero, but may not be in some cases. An example in our taxonomy of an other long-term operating asset would be a security deposit. And we've included one here in this sample data file just for the purpose of demonstration. So it's an other asset, it's not a current asset, and it's not a fixed asset. So it goes into that category of other long-term operating assets. And for property, plant, and equipment, we'll select all of those accounts, including the accumulated depreciation, so that we can track the net value of the asset over time. And retained earnings is simply retained earnings. That's one of the special accounts in QuickBooks. Now, at that point, the mapping process is complete. So, for example, we didn't map any bank accounts. They'll automatically be mapped using their account type to our category of cash and equivalent in the balance sheet taxonomy as an example. In the event that over time you create new accounts, you don't need to repeat this whole process. You can simply use the refresh accounts option, and BizTools will go off and reread the chart of accounts and include them in these lists that you've seen, and it will preserve your existing mapping. So at this point, we can click OK. The mapping's complete, and we'll go through the final step to extract the data from QuickBooks, transform that data, and create the 4 analytical models for the balance sheet, the income statement, financial ratios, and sales, and load that into the BizTools Analytics database, and also publish the out-of-the-box content to the BizTools intranet portal. So we'll click Apply, and you'll notice here, this is listing all the companies and the consolidated groups that we currently have set up. You can process more than one company at once. The only requirement is that they have a common start of the fiscal year. So in this particular case, we're going to just select the one we've just recently added, Barry's Botanical Services. And for this sample data file, the start of the fiscal year is October the 1st, and the current year-to-date value that we saw earlier when we opened the file is the 15th of December. Now, you can either process the data as we're doing now interactively, or you can set it up to automatically process on a schedule. And that's typically done nightly after hours. So it's all automated. It doesn't slow down QuickBooks during the day, and you come into work the next day and the data's all up to date in BizTools for the close of business the previous day. And when you're doing that, you'd use the option of auto update on refresh so that it picks up the current day's date from the machine that you're running QuickBooks on. But in this particular case, being a sample data file, we'll just set that back to December, and we'll leave that at the 15th of December 2017. So we'll click OK on that, and that will, in a moment, open up QuickBooks in the background and begin the data extract process. And what we'll do, in the interest of time, this 30 meg file on this particular demo machine will take about 4 minutes. So we will pause the recording and we'll resume the recording before the end of this refresh process. And we'll have a quick review of that process and also the content that's produced. So you can see at the moment it's running various extract queries against Barry's Botanical Services. And the time this will take is variable. It depends on the size of your data file, the hardware that you're running on. A 30 meg file would take perhaps about 4 minutes on average, and BizTools can work with files over 1 gigabyte. In some cases, they may take over an hour to run, which is an ideal scenario if you're using the scheduled option rather than running it interactively. So for the moment, we'll just pause the recording and we'll come back in a moment or two. So the refresh process is completed, as you can see in the dialog window there, and we'll just go back to the beginning of that. It started at about 10 o'clock and finished at about 10:04. So now what we can do is launch the Report Manager portal again, and we can see a folder for the company we've just processed, Barry's Botanical Services. And that folder contains all of the standard out-of-the-box content, So the standard reports for the balance sheet, income statement, and financial ratios. And we'll just have a quick look at some of these live. And perhaps we'll have a look at the gross margin percent. Additionally, and this occurs for any company that's processed through BizTools, it's built the 4 models that are supporting both the standard reports and also any custom reporting that you want to do. So the models are for income statement, balance sheet, financial ratios, and sales. And they're very easy to access. And we'll just very quickly have a look in Excel. And we won't build a particularly attractive dashboard at this point. We'll just show you the process though. So I'm just going to insert a pivot table, and rather than select a table or range of data, because there is no table or range of data, we're directly connecting Excel to the BizTools Analytics database. We'll use an external data source, which means external to the spreadsheet, and we'll just pick any of the 4 connections in this workbook, and those connections are already set up for you, so you don't need to worry about the technology underpinning that. And we'll just open that and click OK. And now we can select, for example, the closing balance and the accounts, and perhaps we'll put time in the columns. We'll just keep this very simple. In this case, it's a balance, so we'll drill down into a few detailed accounts there. So the grand total is redundant, and we'll just remove that. And let's imagine we want to see some financial ratios for this company. Again, we'll insert a pivot table, an external data source, choose connection, and we'll select ratio analysis, click open, and click OK. And perhaps from the balance sheet, we'll get the current ratio and maybe gross margin percent from the income statement. And perhaps revenue, which is not a ratio, it's a metric. And we'll just put the time dimension in the columns. So with very little effort, we've already got a great deal of data available to us to look at and start to analyze. We won't be doing that during this demonstration. We'll show you how to build dashboards and custom reports in subsequent demos that are available on the website. But what you can see here is that the models understand the nature of the financial data. For example, the revenue for those 4 quarters is adding up to the value for the entire year, whereas for FY17, the current ratio balance is the same as the value for the last quarter in that period, and also for the last month. So that's the 21.85. This is one huge advantage of analytical modeling. You don't have to worry about the complexity of those calculations in Excel. Equally, you could insert a pivot chart, perhaps with a table. And again, we'll just use the, in this case, the sales model, and we might just select revenue and gross margin percent, and perhaps break that down by classes and assign a filter to this data. So we might use the current period in the filter and select something simple like the current year to date. And we'll just quickly tweak that chart, make it a bit easier to read. So we're going to put gross margin percent on as a line and put it on a secondary axis. So there's a very quick example of how to connect to a QuickBooks company data file, how to process the data, and a very, very simple example of how you can work with it in Excel to create custom reports or dashboards. And we'll just close that down. And of course, this report can be saved up to the BizTools Analytics Report Manager portal. And the big advantage of that is that you can collaborate with your colleagues if you've got multiple users, so that you're all working with one version of the truth. So, by all means, get in touch with us if you'd like a private demo, or if you have additional questions about the capabilities of BizTools Analytics working with QuickBooks. You can get in touch with us via email at info@biztoolsanalytics.com, and we'd be happy to have a quick chat with you and find out how we can help you run your business more easily.